The New Year honours 1964 appointments in many of the Commonwealth realms of Queen Elizabeth II to various orders and honours to reward and highlight good works by citizens of those countries. They were announced on the 1st of January 1964 to celebrate the year past and mark the beginning of 1964. United Kingdom. Viscount the Right Honourable David McAdam, Baron Eccles, K.C.V.O., for Public Services. Baron Roy Herbert Thomson, ESQ, Chairman, the Thomson Organisation, Limited, for Public Services. Privy Councillor Sir William Alexander Bustamante, Prime Minister and Minister of External Affairs, Jamaica, since August 1962. George John Charles, Marquess of Lansdowne, D.L., Minister of State for Commonwealth Relations and for the Colonies, Joint Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State, Foreign Office, 1958 to 1962. The Right Honourable William Brereton Couchman, Baron Merthyr, TD, Lord Chairman of Committees and Deputy Speaker, House of Lords, since 1907. Sir Peter Anthony Grayson Rawlinson, QC MP, Member of Parliament for Epsom since 1955. Solicitor General since July 1962. Dr. Eric Williams, Prime Minister and Minister of External Affairs, Trinidad and Tobago, since August 1962. Baronet John Sinclair Weems Arbuthnot, ESQ, M.B.E.T.D., M.P., Member of Parliament for Dover since 1950, Parliamentary Private Secretary to the Parliamentary Secretary, Ministry of Pensions, 1952, and Ministry of Pensions and National Insurance, 1953 to 1955, and to the Parliamentary Secretary, Ministry of Health, 1956, 1957, Second Parliamentary Church Estates Commissioner for Political and Public Services. Sir Charles Dodds, M.V.O.M.D., P.R.C.P., President, Royal College of Physicians. Courtauld Professor of Biochemistry, University of London. Sir Clarence Johnston Graham, for Political Services in Northern Ireland. Humphrey Charles Baskerville Miners, ESQ, Deputy Governor, Bank of England, since March 1954. William McEwen Younger, ESQ, D.SODL, for Political and Public Services. Knight Bachelor Robert Ian Bellinger, ESQ, the Aldermanic Sheriff, City of London. Henry Alexander Benson, ESQ, C.B.E. Partner, Cooper Brothers and Company. Alderman Lionel William Biggs, J.P., for Political and Public Services in Manchester and Macclesfield. Frank Patrick Bishop, ESQ, M.B.E. MP, Member of Parliament for Harrow Central since 1950, for Political and Public Services. Edward Rowan Boland, ESQ, C.B.E. M.D. F. R.C.P. M. R.C.S. Dean of the Medical School, Guy's Hospital. Honorary Consultant to the Army. Major Esme Tatton Cecil Brinton, for Political and Public Services in Worcestershire. Norman Richard Rowley Brooke, ESQ, C.B.E. J.P., for Political and Public Services in Cardiff. Edward Humphrey Brown, ESQ, C.B.E. Deputy Chairman, National Coal Board. Eric Morris Clayson, ESQ, Chairman and Joint Managing Director, The Birmingham Post and Mail, Limited. Theodore Constantine, ESQ, C.B.E. T.D. for Political Services in Harrow. Brigadier Douglas Inglis Crawford, C.B.D. SOTD, D.L. for Public Services in Lancashire. Robert Vere Darwin, ESQ, C.B.E. Principal, Royal College of Art. Philip Barrington Dingle, ESQ, C.B.E. Town Clerk, Manchester. Edward James Dodd, ESQ, C.B.E. H.M. Chief Inspector of Constabulary. Lately Chief Constable of Birmingham. Harry Douglas, ESQ, General Secretary, Iron and Steel Trades Confederation. John Henry Gaddam, ESQ, M. RCS.L. RCP, Director, Institute of Animal Physiology, Abraham, Cambridge Agricultural Research Council. John Richard Hicks, ESQ, Drummond Professor of Political Economy, University of Oxford. Ernest John Hunter, ESQ, C.B.E. J.P., President, British Employers Confederation. Cecil George Mant, ESQ, C.B.E. Controller General, Ministry of Public Building and Works. Alexander Robert Matthewson, ESQ, C.B.E. for Political Services in Edinburgh. Robert Gore Micklethwaite, ESQ, Q.C. National Insurance Commissioner and Industrial Injuries Commissioner. John Hubert Newsom, ESQ, C.B.E. Deputy Chairman, Central Advisory Council for Education. Evan Augustus Norton, ESQ, C.B.E. Lately Chairman, United Birmingham Hospitals. Ronald Stanley Russell, ESQ, M.P. Member of Parliament for Wembley South since 1950. Parliamentary Private Secretary to the Minister of Supply, 1951 to 1954, and to the Minister of Housing and Local Government, 1950 for 1955. For Political and Public Services. John Arthur Gillamscott, ESQ, T.D. Secretary, the Church Assembly. Herbert John Seddon, ESQ, C.M.G. D.M.F. RCS, Director of Studies, Institute of Orthopaedics, University of London. Barnard Stross, ESQ, M.B. Ch. B.M.P. Member of Parliament for Stoke-on-Trent since 1950. Member of Parliament for Hanley, 1945 to 1950. For Political and Public Services, Charles Ikes, ESQ, C.B.E. Deputy Chairman, Thomas Firth and John Brown Limited. For Services to Metallurgical Research, Jules Thorne, ESQ, Chairman and Managing Director, Thorne Electrical Industries Limited. John Norman Tootill, ESQ, C.B.E. for Services to Scottish Industry. State of Victoria. The Honourable Percy Thomas Burns, a member of the Legislative Council for the North Western Province, State of Victoria. Michael Chamberlain, ESQ, O.B.E. of Kew, State of Victoria, for Services to the Community. State of Queensland. Douglas Stewart Forbes, ESQ, of Brisbane, State of Queensland, for Public Services. State of South Australia. John Burton Cleland, ESQ, C.B.E. M.D., Ch.M. Emeritus Professor of Pathology, University of Adelaide, State of South Australia. State of Western Australia. The Honourable Lawrence Walter Jackson, Senior Queen Judge of the Supreme Court of the State of Western Australia. Commonwealth Relations. Edward Daniel Weston Crawshaw, ESQ, QC, Justice of Appeal of the Court of Eastern Africa. Overseas Territories. Nicholas Patrick France Bonnetard, ESQ, Chief Justice, Seychelles. Richard Charles Catling, ESQ, C.M.G. O.B.E. Inspector General of Police, Kenya. Stafford Lofthouse Sands, ESQ, C.B.E. for Public Services in the Bahamas. Tang Shi U Kin, ESQ, C.B.E. J.P. for Public Services in Hong Kong. Frank Worrell, ESQ, for Services to Cricket. Order of the Bath Knight Grand Cross, Military Division. Admiral Sir Derek Holland Martin, K. C.B.D. S.O.D. S.C. Civil Division. Sir William Stewart Murray, K. B.E. C.B. Permanent Under Secretary of State, Scottish Office. Knight Commander Military Division. Vice Admiral Richard Michael Smeaton, C.B.M. B.E. Vice Admiral John Byng Fruin, C.B. Lieutenant General Geoffrey Harding Baker, C. B.C. M.G.C. B.E.M.C. late Royal Regiment of Artillery. Lieutenant General Charles Henry Pepys Harrington, C. B.C. B.E.D. S.O.M.C. late Infantry. Colonel, the Cheshire Regiment. Acting Air Marshal John Gilbert Davis, C.B.O. B.E. Royal Air Force. Civil Division Richard William Barnes Clark, Esq. C. B.O. B.E. Second Secretary, H.M. Treasury. Arthur Charles Walter Drew, Esq. C.B. Permanent Under Secretary of State, War Office. Sir Solly Zuckerman, C.B. M.D. Chief Scientific Advisor to the Minister of Defence. Companion, Military Division Rear Admiral Robert Love Alexander, D. S.O.D. S.C. Rear Admiral Peter Nilbucklick, D. S.O. Rear Admiral John Michael Dudgeon Gray, O. B.E. Rear Admiral Peter John Hill Norton. Rear Admiral Maurice Alexander McMullen, O. B.E. Major General Robert Anthony Piggott, O. B.E. Rear Admiral John Earl Scotland, D. S.C. Major General Norman Hastings Taylor, D. S.O. Rear Admiral Charles Peter Graham Walker, D. S.C. Rear Admiral James Humphrey Walwyn, O. B.E. Major General Mervyn Andrew Haldane Butler, C. B.E.D. S.O.M.C. late Infantry. Major General George Francis de Gex, O. B.E. late Royal Regiment of Artillery. Major General Ralph Henry Farrand, late Royal Regiment of Artillery. Major General Ian Henry Freeland, D. S.O. late Infantry. Major General John Dutton Frost, D. S.O.M.C. late Infantry. Major General Arthur Roderick Filer, O. B.E. late Infantry. Major General Thomas Cecil Hook Pearson, C. B.E.D. S.O. late Infantry. Major General Walter Collier Walker, C. B.E.D. S.O. late Gurkha Rifles. Air Vice Marshal Robert Norman Bateson, D. S.O.D. F.C. Royal Air Force. Air Vice Marshal Sidney Wheatman Rochford Hughes, C. B.E.A. F.C. Royal Air Force. Air Vice Marshal Thomas William Piper, C. B.E.A. F.C. Royal Air Force. Air Vice Marshal Roy Scoggins, C. B.E.Q. H.D.S.L. D.S. R.C.S. Royal Air Force. Air Commodore Frederick Osborne Story Dobell, C. B.E. Royal Air Force. Air Commodore Aeneas Ranald Donald MacDonald, D. F.C. Royal Air Force. Air Commodore David Malcolm Strong, A. F.C. Royal Air Force. Acting Air Commodore John Charles MacDonald, C. B.E.D. F.C.A. F.C. Royal Air Force. Civil Division John Gladding Major Alcock, Esq. H.M. Chief Inspector of Schools, Ministry of Education, Dennis Charles Barnes, Esq. Deputy Secretary, Ministry of Labour, Henry Montague Burrows, Esq. C. B.E. Clark Assistant Officers of the House of Lords, Arthur Lucius Michael Gary, Esq. Deputy Secretary of the Cabinet, Brian Humphreys Davies, Esq. Assistant Under Secretary of State, Air Ministry, Charles Dunbar, Esq. Director, Fighting Vehicles Research and Development Establishment, War Office, Samuel Goldman, Esq. 3rd Secretary, H.M. Treasury, George Ims, Esq. Commissioner, Board of Customs and Excise, John Morgan Jones, Esq. C. B.E. Welsh Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food, John Morden Newton, Esq. Director of Personnel, General Post Office, Colonel Thomas Murray Niven, T.D., D.L., formerly Chairman, Territorial and Auxiliary Forces Association for the County of the City of Glasgow, Gerard Ryder, Esq. Solicitor to the Board of Trade, William Hurst Sr., Esq. Under Secretary, Department of Agriculture and Fisheries for Scotland, Edward Allen Shillito, Esq. Under Secretary, Admiralty, William Ferguson Stout, Esq. Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Home Affairs for Northern Ireland. Order of St. Michael and St. George, Knight Grand Cross Sir Ralph Francis Annick Gray K. CMG K. CVOO, BE Governor and Commander-in-Chief British Guiana. Sir Roger Bentham Stevens K. CMG, lately Foreign Office. Knight Commander Hugh Carlton Green ESQO, BE Director General British Broadcasting Corporation. Major General Sir Rowan Delacombe K. BE CBD, SO Governor of the State of Victoria. Mark Dalcu Tenant ESQ CBC, MG Secretary Central African Office. Andrew Graham Gilchrist ESQ C. MG Her Majesty's Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary in Jakarta. Anthony Edward Lambert ESQ C. MG Her Majesty's Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary in Helsinki. Cecil Cuthbert Parrott ESQ C. MG O. BE Her Majesty's Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary in Prague. Companion Brigadier Athol Earl MacDonald Brown O.B.E. Secretary-General, ANZAC Agency and Regional Director for the Pacific Region, Commonwealth War Graves Commission. John Frederick Foster ESQ, Secretary, Association of Universities of the British Commonwealth. Arnold Heckel ESQ, Principal British Trade Commissioner for the Province of Quebec, Board of Trade. Henry Powell Groom Johnson ESQ, C. BETD, British Council Representative in India. Norman Leach ESQ, Under-Secretary, Department of Technical Cooperation. Gordon Charles Henry Slater ESQ, C. BE, Under-Secretary, Ministry of Labour. Armashad I. Larson Adu ESQ, O.B.E. Secretary-General, East African Common Services Organisation. The Honourable John Sidney James Clancy, Senior Queen Judge, Supreme Court of the State of New South Wales. Desmond John Chetwood Crawley ESQ, C. VO, British High Commissioner in Sierra Leone. Alan Francis Rathbone Griffin ESQ, Administrative Officer, State of Sarawak, for Public Services. Frank George Rivers ESQ, Postmaster General, East African Posts and Telecommunications Administration. Frank Downer Jackman ESQ, Commissioner of Highways and Director of Local Government, State of South Australia. The Honourable Kenneth James Morris, formerly Deputy Premier and Minister for Labour and Industry, State of Queensland. Cyril Stanley Pickard ESQ, an Assistant Under-Secretary of State in the Commonwealth Relations Office. Ifan Charles Harold Freeman ESQ, Permanent Secretary, Nyasaland. John James Cowpithwaite ESQ, O.B.E. Financial Secretary, Hong Kong. Arthur Douglas Bruce Hamilton ESQ, Chairman, Public Service Commission, Barbados. Arthur Francis Watts ESQ, O.B.E. Resident Advisor and British Agent, Eastern Aden Protectorate. Michael Norden Evans ESQ, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Health and Housing, Kenya. Peter Maid Gordon ESQ, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture and Animal Husbandry, Kenya. Mervyn Collett Manby ESQ, Deputy Inspector General of Police, Kenya. Archibald Ralph Melville ESQ, Director of Agriculture, Kenya. Lieutenant Colonel William Hugh Adamson Beck D.S.O. Military Attaché, Her Majesty's Embassy, Jakarta. Thomas Frank Brenchley ESQ, Foreign Office. William Patrick Cranston ESQ, lately Councillor, Her Majesty's Embassy, Kuwait. Colin Grendon Harris ESQ, Councillor, Her Majesty's Embassy, Tokyo. Sydney Horace Hebblethwaite ESQ, Councillor, Her Majesty's Embassy, Rangoon. Arthur Roy Handyside Kellis ESQ, lately Foreign Office Representative, Imperial Defence College. William Bernard John Letwidge ESQ, Foreign Office. Crawford Murray MacLehose ESQ, M.B.E. Foreign Office. Maurice Oldfield ESQ, C.B.E. Counselor, Her Majesty's Embassy, Washington. Andrew Alexander Steele Stark ESQ, Foreign Office. Royal Victorian Order, Knight Grand Cross the Right Honourable Walter Turner Viscount Monckton of Brenchley, K. CMG, K. CVO, MCQ, C. Knight Commander Henry George Rushbury ESQ, C. VO, C. BE. Commander Henriette Alice, Mrs. Abel Smith, Walter Edward Avonable ESQ. Colonel the Right Honourable John Amer, Earl of Stair, M.B.E. Gordon William Stewart ESQ. Member 4th Class Wing Commander Donald Lawrence Attlee, Royal Air Force. Herrick Bunny ESQ, B. Muse, F. R.C. O. Major Peter Cecil Clark. Frederick Charles Gilman ESQ, O. B.E. Albert Charles Edward Musk ESQ. Superintendent Frederick Salter, M.V.O. Berkshire Constabulary. Member 5th Class Horace William Jackson ESQ. Jules Henry Joran ESQ. Squadron Leader John Edwards Mackenzie Hall, Royal Air Force. Lieutenant Commander Peter John Doige Northey, Royal Navy. Lieutenant Commander William Ernest Pierce, Royal Navy. Eric John Frederick Robinson ESQ. Alexander McKiddie Sivrite ESQ. New Zealand. Knight Bachelor Wolf Fisher of Auckland. For public services, particularly in connection with the development of industry, the Honourable Thaddeus Percy McCarthy, a Judge of the Court of Appeal of New Zealand. Order of St. Michael and St. George, Companion of the Order of St. Michael and St. George Frederick Raymond Mackin, Commissioner of Inland Revenue, Major Neil Aylmer Rattray MBE of South Canterbury. For public services, particularly as President of the New Zealand Counties Association. Order of the British Empire, Knight Commander of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division Andrew Linton CBE, Chairman of the New Zealand Dairy Production and Marketing Board, the Honourable Sir Alfred Kingsley North QC, President of the New Zealand Court of Appeal. Commander of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division the Reverend George Irvin Lawrenson, General Superintendent of Home and Maori Missions in the Methodist Church. Herbert Leslie Longbottom, Dunedin. For services to industry and education, William Henry Nankervis JP of Wellington. For services to local government, Ivor Pritchard, Chief Judge of the Maori Land Court. Military Division Brigadier Alan Huia Andras OBE, Adjutant General, New Zealand Army. Officer of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division Harry Heaton Barker, Mayor of Gisborne. Arthur Walter Christmas of Auckland. For services in the administration of company law, Frederick William Coombs, President of the Palmerston North Return Services Association. Alan Thompson Aorangi Fisher. For services to the community and education, particularly as Chairman of the Southland Education Board, Charles Alexander Fleming of Wellington. Senior Principal Scientific Officer, Geological Survey, Department of Scientific and Industrial Research, Rupert Selwyn Australia Graham MBF RCSED of Hamilton. For services to medicine, Gilbert Alexander Lawrence JP of Wellington. For services to science, Te Rangi Ata Ahu Akiniwe Royal MC of Rotorua. For services to the Maori people, Mrs. Edith Lamb Wilson JP of Wellington. For services to the community, Ivan Vernon Wilson. For services to the community, particularly as President of the Southland Progress League. Military Division Commander Cecil Francis Cutts, Royal New Zealand Navy. Lieutenant Colonel Leslie Arthur Pierce MBE, the New Zealand Regiment, Wing Commander John Percival Carnews Brown, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Member of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division Norman Leon Bensman JP of Takaka, for services to local government. Miss Mavis Elizabeth Byres of Martin, for services to nursing. Mrs. Kathleen Emily Duxfield of Horotiu, for services to the community, especially in connection with the New Zealand Red Cross Society. Miss Alice Annie Greenslade of Dunedin, for philanthropic services. Mrs. Marata Tehui Huinga of Hastings, for services to the community, particularly as Dominion President of the Maori Women's Welfare League. William Robert Hopcroft JP of Palmerston North, for services to local government. Arthur James Hartley Kirkham JP of Gisborne, for services to local government. Leonard Francis Walter Lovell JP of New Plymouth, for services to the community and local government. Mrs. Joan Stewart McCormick, for services to the community, particularly as President of the Auckland Red Cross Society. Morris Henry McGlashan of Nelson, for services to the community and local government. Miss Mona Christina McIntyre of Invercargill, for services to the community. Isaac Grundy McNair of Papakura. Roy Gordon Murdoch JP, for services to local government, especially as Chairman of the North Auckland Electric Power Board. Ernest Ormrod of Wellington, for services in the field of music, especially as President of the New Zealand Brass Bands Association. Miss Christabel Elizabeth Robinson of Christchurch, for services to the community, especially as Secretary of the Canterbury Sheltered Workshop Association. Miss Violet Augusta Roche of Auckland, for services to the community, especially in connection with Dr. Barnardo's Homes. Mrs. Nellie Winifred Burness Schroeder of Marlborough, for services to the community, especially in connection with the Women's Division of Federated Farmers. Military Division Lieutenant Harry Lewis Douglas Anthony G. Royal New Zealand Navy. Warrant Officer Class 1 John William Bench Royal New Zealand Army Service Corps. Major Jack Harvey Royal New Zealand Army Ordnance Corps. Major Edward Gale Latter Royal New Zealand Infantry Corps. Major Earl Travis Pleasant said New Zealand Territorial Force. Flight Lieutenant Rodney Greville Williams DFC Royal New Zealand Air Force. Warrant Officer James Arthur Mola Knox Royal New Zealand Air Force. British Empire Medal Civil Division Raymond Vernon Petrovsky, Constable, New Zealand Police Force. George Henry Tancock, Supervising Electrical Technician, HMNZ Dockyard, Auckland. Military Division Chief Engine Room Artificer Peter John Hyde, Royal New Zealand Navy. Chief Petty Officer Frank Herbert Jeffries, Royal New Zealand Naval Volunteer Reserve. Chief Petty Officer Bernard Thomas Price, Royal New Zealand Navy. Chief Radio Supervisor Victor John Stewart St. Clair, Royal New Zealand Navy. Warrant Officer Class 2 Mabon Keith Brown, Royal New Zealand Infantry Corps. Staff Sergeant Ronald Charles Lee, Royal New Zealand Armoured Corps. Sergeant Lindsay John Richardson, New Zealand Army Education Corps. Sergeant Lawrence Melville Taylor, Royal New Zealand Infantry Corps. Flight Sergeant John Devoyle, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Flight Sergeant William Francis Nelson, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Air Force Cross Squadron Leader Bruce Allen Wood, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Master Signaller Harold John Granger, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Queen's Fire Service Medal for Distinguished Service Charles Cuthbert Knight, Chief Fire Officer, Geraldine Volunteer Fire Brigade. John Philp, Chief Fire Officer, Invercargill Fire Brigade. Queen's Police Medal for Distinguished Service Hans Otto Lauritz Hansen, Superintendent, New Zealand Police Force. Gordon Allen Howes, Assistant Commissioner, New Zealand Police Force. Queen's Commendation for Valuable Service in the Air Flight Lieutenant John Douglas Lack, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Flight Lieutenant Henry John Coventry, Royal New Zealand Air Force.